Hey, Armin here. Welcome to the NSP Nutrition Show, where we cover training, nutrition, supplementation strategies, and a whole lot more. So stand by. Hey, and welcome to the NSP Nutrition Show. I'm Armin Eckelbarger.
Hey, and I'm Frank Mills, and welcome to the show today. Armin and I, we have a lot of great content for you. We're going to be talking about the benefits of fasting. If you haven't fasted yet, you're going to learn all about that. And also in the second segment of the show, we're going to be talking about the benefits of saturated fat. Yes, there are benefits, and Armin's going to fill you in on all that stuff. Armin, you came up with a lot of great content today, man. You're always coming through with this good stuff. How do you do it?
Well, hopefully it's good stuff. I'm thinking it is, but hey, like today, I just thought it'd be a good eye opener for those calorie counting people that, they think that, that's the end all to be all, because I don't think that way. And so, if you don't eat X amount of calories per day, how are you going to put on muscle, that kind of concern. So there's a lot to know when it comes to nutrition. And it probably will always be a lot to know when it comes to nutrition. So we're just tackling it one item at a time.
Well, when it comes to fasting, this should be pretty interesting for the folks out there that want to kind of put on some muscle, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, again, if you're concerned about, how it would affect, we're going to highlight some of the keys of that, but it should be an eye opener. I mean, it was an eye opener for me, so that's why I'm saying that. So,
well, let's start, I guess, with what maybe fasting means for clarity for everyone, so everybody understands what you mean by fasting.
All right. So there's a lot of different, as you learn about fasting, there's a lot of different approaches to it. So what we're focused on is fasting where you're just refraining from having food, from eating food. And we're not going to refrain from any particular, from liquids other than just the liquid's going to be simple liquids. So water, tea, coffee, those kind of things. So you don't necessarily have to refrain from drinking liquids, but in other words, when we're talking about that, you're talking about no alcohol or other things that affect your insulin levels and things like that.
Right. I actually told a friend of mine that I fasted, and he said, "Why are you starving yourself?" I'm like, "No, it's no, you're missing the point here." You're not trying to starve yourself, but there are some benefits from not eating for 24 hours to 36 hours, or even 48 hours, whatever, however long you want to do it, but. There are different types of fasting, and as we educate, we'll get into the results and everything, but what types of different fasting options do people have if they want to try this?
Well, for today's conversation, we're going to talk about, intermittent fasting. So that's fasting for like 12 to 16-hour period.
Okay.
And that's something that I think most people should start with if they're going to look to do some fasting. Then after that, then you have the 24-hour fast, which I like that one too, and I've done that. And a little bit more involved with that. And there's certain techniques you want to do when you're doing that type of fasting that we're going to touch on. Then you have like a 3-day fast, and then 3-day fast, and I know you've done it. Yeah, I haven't done that one simply because of my training schedule, because I don't fast on training days. But there's a lot of science that states it has really great benefits to it. Then after that, you got fasts that last for 5 or more days. And there's just certain things that your body does when it does this fasting that actually is good for you. So we're going to touch on that as well.
Right. All right. So you mentioned intermittent fasting. Is that the type of fasting you want to talk about today then?
Yeah, I was going to cover some of the fasting that I've really done for myself. I feel like I've got a better connection for people. I have more experience with it. So that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes perfect sense. So where would you like to start, Armin?
We'll start with intermittent fasting, because I think anybody that's going to do fasting should start with that to kind of learn the basics. But intermittent fasting is basically no food for a 12 to 16-hour period. And that's a pretty popular fasting strategy. And so it's just what it mostly allows you to do is just drop that insulin level down and actually start burning some fat and help to clear out your digestive tract too.
Okay. So just to clarify one thing, when you say 12 to 16 hours, that includes a night's sleep, or is that like the entire day and then you sleep? You're not counting your hours that you're asleep?
That's a good point. So to get into fasting, the best way to do it is to do it while you're sleeping. Get as many hours that way because you're not eating anyways. Right. And that way you don't have to struggle throughout the day, seeing other people eat and maybe dealing with the psychology of that. So you want to maximize your fasting strategy by doing as much of it when you're sleeping. So that's how I would recommend it. But that's a good point to bring up.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about your experience with your fasting. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
So, I felt like it really helps a lot to burn more fat because you get your insulin level down so that the body has to use other energy system, which is going to be ketones from the fat cells. So it's great for that. And I just found it when I do it, I'm fairly lean, so it really tightens my stomach up pretty quickly. So that was a pretty unique side effect that I noticed from doing it, which was to me a good feeling. It just means it's affecting me. And it's fairly easy to do. It doesn't really cost you anything. And when you're doing it, but there is a little bit of strategy. I'd recommend that you start low carb before you start getting into the fasting, just to kind of get that insulin level down. Because when insulin levels are elevated, it can affect your hunger some as well because you're running off the quick energy of sugars, of carbohydrates and sugars. So if you do like, a low carb or carb cycling strategy, I just feel it's much more effective and it'll be easier for you to do. Just my opinion on it.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. So what about a 24-hour fast?
Yeah, so that's kind of a unique experience, and you got a little psychology going on with that. So, and I try to do that at least 1 to 2 times a week. And some people look at me like I got 3 eyeballs because of the way I train and what I do, but at the same time, I've noticed good benefits from it. So, and I recommend it for people to do. But again, you want to structure it so that you don't have a lot of stress that day, and you don't want to do that on a training day. Your 24-hour fast is I do it on my off training days. That way, I have good energy. I'm not breaking down muscle from training. So that's another thing that you don't want to do, in my opinion. That way you're not in a position where you would break down too much muscle or cause muscle to be burned as energy. So that's one of the reasons there.
Well, a lot of people, I'm sure, as they listen to you, they're working out, they're training, they're working hard to build that muscle up. Yeah. They're probably concerned about muscle loss. Are you concerned about muscle loss at all with this?
Well, that's a good question. So what I've learned is from doing proper fasting where you've gotten that insulin level down, what you're going to end up burning is mostly ketones and fat. And when you burn fat, it spares muscle. It doesn't break down muscle. Unlike if your insulin levels are elevated and you run out of glucose, then insulin is still elevated. What it'll do, it'll convert muscle to glucose by breaking down muscle into amino acids to make glucose. And that's where you can lose muscle. So that's why there's some strategy behind how you should do a 24-hour fast or something like that. Another thing that also can happen based on research, and also I've seen this happen through people's blood work, is it elevates your hormones. Elevate your growth hormone and elevate your testosterone because the body, because the way the body has to deal with this level of stress, it elevates that, which is a good thing. Another thing it does do is it burns off undigested proteins. So it cannibalizes that because it's going to use it for energy. So that's a good thing there. You're clearing out your system with that. And then it tends to clear out old senescent cells that aren't functioning well or slowly dying. Those get cannibalized. And so that prevents them from becoming cancerous, potentially, because a cancerous cell is a damaged cell that starts to replicate. So if you're clearing out those old senescent cells and you get rid of that undigested protein, you bring your insulin levels down, which is going to help you to burn more fat. The other side effect also is because of the way it affects the body, it can actually perk up more stem cell activity, and that comes from the bone marrow. So that's another good thing that fasting can do. So if you have stem cells, that's great news, because those are new cells that you can work with. So in my opinion, based on, and these are things I've read and learned, there seems to be a lot of benefits to it. So, and personally, I don't feel like I've lost much muscle at all, which would sound illogical from a calorie focused people point of view. But at the end of the day, calories don't build muscle. What builds muscle is protein and fat and your hormones and recovery. Calories are only an element of day-to-day energy and activity. So I just want to make that point, because fasting to me has been very beneficial, and it helps to heighten your body's level of dealing with that stress, which is called hormesis. So I think it's a good thing to do.
Okay. I'm sure a lot of people too, if they're working out, they're concerned about the muscle stuff, that we just talked about. But what about strength? Nobody wants to lose their strength, right?
Yeah, so that's another reason why I'm mentioning that you want to be low carb or do carb cycling to get the best results from them, because you're not focused on having a lot of glycogen for your day-to-day strength. You're focused on having fat as your day-to-day energy, but you reload glycogen. So they reload the muscles and the liver, so you do have good strength. So in my experience, because like if I do a full 24-hour fast, at the end of the fast, I'm going to have a decent meal, fairly large meal. So I'm going to have some protein, some carbs, and some fat. So, and I'm going to do this the night before I train. So I should have plenty of energy to train. And I found that my levels of strength did not drop, and my energy was still good. Again, because I'm burning a lot of fat through this process. So, and I'm sparing those carbs for the training. So that's why I like to do it. And so I don't think it's really affected my strength much at all. Other than, what can affect your strength is lack of sleep. If you don't get enough sleep, I can tell you right now, it's going to affect it. So from an energy standpoint, I think it's held up really well.
Okay. Now, when you're fasting, it's important that you're staying hydrated, you're drinking fluids. I know when I did a 3-day fast, I drank coffee, I drank tea, and then I took the NSP beef liver capsules, which were terrific. But that was it. On a 24-hour fast, I assume that you're only drinking fluids. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's, you need to keep yourself hydrated, but also what people need to understand, you want to drink a lot of fluids, because especially water, because that's a natural toxin flusher of the system. So as these toxins and other things in your system are getting cannibalized and used up, you're going to flush that through drinking a proper amount of water. That's great news. And then that keeps your body feeling good too.
Well, I know that probably the folks that are listening are concerned about energy level. If they have to go to work, or if they have to do things throughout the day, you fast. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to have the energy that I need. What about energy, Armin? Any information you can offer there?
Okay, so again, I'll just say that if you're having a lot of carbohydrates daily, then that could be a factor. Okay, because you're going to get low on glucose, and so the body's going to want to convert, because the insulin stays elevated. The body's going to want to convert some of the muscle into glucose to give you energy. So I would say if you're having a lot of carbohydrates, it could be a little tougher. Yes, I never ran into that because I do carb cycling, so I'm low carb for quite a number of days. Well, depends, but I'm low carb for a certain number of days, and then I'll have a carb reload day. So when you do it that way, you don't have a lot of insulin hanging around. So when you don't have a lot of insulin hanging around, your energy is going to come from the fat that's in your system. And so that's what's good. And again, I don't do it on training days, just non-training days. So my energy's good. And I'm actually very productive. I know I'll get a lot of stuff done on my fasting day because I don't get interrupted with, food. I'm just drinking water or coffee or tea, and I'm just getting it done. And I think, well, everything's good.
Have to agree with you. I know when I did my 3-day fast, I felt a little loopy on day 2 a little bit at times because, wow, it was a big change for me. But there were a lot of positives. And one of the biggest positives was, being able to get rid of cravings and things like that I was experiencing for what I was eating.
Yeah.
But, there are benefits of fasting. So let's get into that. What would be the reason why somebody would want to even try fasting? What are the benefits, Armin?
Well, there seems to be a lot of them, but we'll just kind of hit the key ones. I mean, first and
Okay.
foremost, it's going to improve your insulin sensitivity because insulin's going to drop down because you're not needing it because you're not taking in carbohydrates and sugars. That's also going to improve your glucose levels, which is all good. People don't realize that too many carbohydrates and sugars and having high insulin levels is toxic to the body. It really is. And so then that's why you see all these health conditions coming up. It's just not good. So it's going to help that. It helps reduce inflammation, okay, because of the way the body's dealing with the stress. It's a mild stress. It can help lower blood pressure, which that should be a win for a lot of people.
Right.
Along with triglycerides, it helps burn out excess triglycerides because those are sugar and carb related issue. So those get used as energy, and then it's going to help your cholesterol levels. So, which is another good thing. They also feel like it helps with brain function. I would agree with that, and increased nerve cell synthesis. So that's another comment that was made about it. And then the ironic thing is it can help boost your metabolism. And people think, oh, no, your metabolism is going to slow down if you're not taking any food. No, it actually perks up your metabolism. And you'll notice it when you're working. You're like, you've got good energy. And, I think you went through that as well.
Right.
Then I think the other reason for that is because it perks up your hormones. And hormones are the messengers that tell your body how to operate. So if they perk up like growth hormone, testosterone, et cetera, when those perk up, that's what you need. And that's a good thing because, your body's going to use those as they've perked up. And then finally, they feel like it can aid in reducing the chance of cancer just because it cannibalizes those senescent old damaged cells or old cells that aren't functioning properly. So those will get ate up from the body needing the energy. So I think it's a great win-win personally.
Well, a lot of great information. You gave a lot of reasons on why at least you should try it. And, so the thing that you're encouraging is just try a short-term fast, a 12 to 16 hour to start.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. All right. So like I said, a lot of great information. Anything that you'd like to add as we end the segment?
Again, if you're going to start doing it, I do recommend you do like a low carb strategy or carb cycling strategy where you don't have a lot of carbohydrates to get the insulin down. So that way you go right into the fat burning mode. And so your energy stays good and consistent because fats burn for 4 to 6 hours versus carbohydrates and sugars are only good for an hour, hour and a half. So that's the reason for that. And you got to keep your insulin levels down so that when you do have some carbohydrates and sugars, your insulin sensitivity is going to be great. And that means it's going to absorb properly into the muscles and liver the way it should. And you don't have excess insulin floating around because once it does its job, then it's going to drop right back down. So I think it's a really great technique for more fat burning, especially if you're struggling with that. And again, just want to repeat, do it on your non-training days or days of low stress. Okay, so you get through it and you'll learn from it as you do it. I mean, every time I do it, I learn a little bit more about myself and how my body responds. And so don't feel like you're going to be burning muscle, break down muscle, and lead to muscle loss because that hasn't happened with me. I mean, I've got pictures of how I look. The other thing is, if you did lose any muscle, it bounces right back when you start eating and training. So you're not. It's temporary.
The one thing I forgot to ask, Armin, what about supplementation? I did actually bring up the beef liver, but is there any supplementation that you should or should not do as you're fasting?
Well, that's a good point. I don't do anything on the fasting day other than supplements I need to take for my hormones. Okay, like I take pregnenolone and DHEA, but that's just to help with keeping those levels more optimal. But I don't do anything else. I just have coffee, water, and some tea. Just kind of keep myself busy. And you drink a lot of water, it fills you up, so that curbs any potential appetite issues as well. But the supplement thing, I would just try to stay clear of that because you want the body to do as much adapting to the stress as you can, and just kind of keep that to a minimum. So, I mean, the beef liver was fine. It's just putting some, some protein in there. And that's another thing you can do. It's not, you're taking like, 5 or 10 capsules at a time. So that's not a big deal. But it just depends on how thorough you want your fasting to be and how technical you want your fasting. Some people are real technical about fasting. So, but at the end of the day, I think it's a good thing to do.
Well, I agree, and hope everyone enjoyed the segment. If you want to check out the beef liver, it's on nspnutrition.com. It is available right now. And Arm and I, when we come back, we're going to be talking about the benefits of saturated fat. So right now, stand by for a quick word from the NSP Nutrition Company. We'll be right back.
Hey, and welcome back to the NSP Nutrition Show. I'm Armin Eckelbarger.
And I'm Frank Mills. And hey, before we get into the benefits of saturated fat, I wanted to talk about a product from NSP Nutrition. NSP stands for Naturally Sourced Products. So that's one of the things that attracted me to the company. Armin as well. But we both take a product called Alpha Male Complex. And Alpha Male Complex is, you see these commercials on, and there's a couple of well-known sports athletes that end it with, and she'll like it too commercials. And this is a supplement that actually works. I've tried it. I'm very pleased with the results, how it makes me feel. Armin, I know you take it, but it's a quality natural product that can give you, a lot of the benefits of what we see advertised out there, right?
Yeah, it helps with your body processes. It helps with, hormone levels as well. For example, that has Tonkat Ali, which that helps can affect the sex-binding hormone globulins somewhat, which frees up your free testosterone. So that's which gives you more energy and the benefits of that too. This is an example, but it has all the other high quality herbs which help your levels, like ashwagandha and things like that. So you just read the ingredient label, but I think you'll be surprised how effective it is.
Yeah, I was not only surprised by how well it worked, but I was surprised at the price. I mean, come on now. I mean, for $34.99 for, Alpha Male Complex, I expected it to be like $50, maybe more. So take advantage of it. If you want something that works, we're telling you it works. Try the Alpha Male Complex from NSP Nutrition. All right, so let's get into the benefits of saturated fat. Probably a lot of people are skeptical and go, there's no benefits to saturated fat. What? This is going to go completely against what we see in the media, the medical community, and is going to ruffle some feathers a little bit. What do you think?
Most likely. I mean, there's you have a lot of people that they're just throwing the beef industry under the bus and anything related to cholesterol. There's going to be a lot of back and forth on it.
Right.
Yeah, I could get that, but at the same time, there's also better information out there too, which is revealing things that people need to be aware of. I mean, saturated fat is not a villain that it's been purported to be in the media and in the medical community. So, but this is our viewpoints on it. Take it for what it is, but I'm eating it, and I don't have a problem with
it. Right. Well, why don't we get started by defining what saturated fat actually is so that everybody understands?
All right. Well, what it is they're hydrogen molecules, and they contain only single bonds between carbon molecules. So that's what a saturated fat is. Again, hydrogen molecules with only single bonds with carbon molecules. Simple, pretty simple there.
Okay.
The saturation of hydrogen molecules results in saturated fats being solid at room temperature. That's what that means. So when you cook it, it becomes a liquid. Then when it cools down, it becomes solid. So that's one of the key things to understand. But then again, keep in mind that there's different types of saturated fat depending on the carbon chain. So you can have short, long, medium, and then very long chain fatty acids, which all have different effects on the body. So, but in a nutshell, that's what we're talking about on saturated fat.
Okay. So let's talk about the food that's out there that I guess are made up of saturated fats, have saturated fats. Do you have a list of things that have it?
Yeah, that's a good point. So you're going to expect anything from the dairy industry, anything from the beef industry, which, both interrelated. And then you have, all the meats. So you have pork, beef, lamb, and all the poultry. That's all going to have saturated fat, butter, cheese, your milk products, coconut, palm oil, and then also actually avocados have saturated fat. But I don't think people understand that. So do a little research on that if you disagree. But there's saturated fat in avocados.
All right. So not to get sidetracked here, but those are actual foods that, right? Well, what about processed food slash like saturated fat? Is that like a whole other category?
Well, most processed foods don't have saturated fat in them. They have the vegetable and the seed oils, and so. But there's a lot of things people don't understand about those fats. So, but yeah, you're not going to see. The reason is because saturated fat is a liquid when it's heated, and then it's a different type of fat when it cools off. So it wouldn't be in a processed food. They wouldn't be able to get that to work. Yeah.
Okay. See, that's why I asked the questions. I just wanted to know. Okay. So let's get into the controversy of it all. What is the controversy of saturated fat?
Okay. Before I say that, I just want to say one other thing.
Sure.
If you add a processed food with coconut oil in it, yeah, you'll have a little saturated fat. So just throwing that back out there.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So back to the controversy thing. What is the controversy of saturated fat?
Well, if you take it in, you're just going to add more fat to your system, which is more cholesterol, which is going to lead to heart disease and all these bad things. But what people don't or may not be aware of is your body actually makes saturated fat. An example would be palmitic acid. Your body makes that. So if it was so bad, it also makes it from too much carb intake too, because your insulin is involved with doing that. So you're going to make palmitic acid with carbohydrates or without it. Okay. But if it was so bad, we'd all be dead, right? Because your body makes it
right
every day. So that's something, hey, that's a good point. Maybe you need more research here. Okay. And then, whether fat increases heart disease has long been a controversial topic and probably always will be. But some of the recent studies are showing that ultra processed, carb rich, and sugary foods are really pose a higher risk than saturated fat. And we're going to talk about why that would be. But that's what people need to, be aware of. Okay. Because when we talk about how much saturated fat you take, that's a whole nother element to the story.
Well, you brought up a lot of interesting things about the processed food and sugary foods, but to dig a little deeper, talk about the saturated fat in a ribeye steak. That tastes really good, and it's good for me. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean,
there we go. Okay,
people are. They're thinking, well, it's a chunk of fat. Well, your body knows how to use that. It's it's an all natural source of nutrition. It's not man-made. It's the man-made stuff, in my opinion, the man-made stuff that you need to be watching out for, because most man-made stuff does not have a lot of benefits, and it's showing. I mean, just look around.
Right.
What are people eating?
Well, they're talking about the risks and, the health issues of saturated fat, but they're they're so focused on saturated fat, more so that they are on processed food. And there's tons of risks out there, right?
Oh, yeah. So, we'll just talk about, what appears to be recommended is not really helping. Okay. I mean, look at the increased rates of heart disease and obesity
Right.
So let me just give you a statistic here. Okay. Beef sales since like 1975 or whatever, beef sales have been down 40% since all the saturated fat was the poison, the bad stuff. And guess what? The heart disease levels and rates of obesity have not changed for the better. So you got 40% less people eating beef, but things haven't improved a nickel. So you got to wonder about what's going on here. I mean, and just look around at people. Are they skinnier or are they fatter? Okay.
Right.
So that's a whole nother thing. Okay. So, when you start analyzing things, let me just say this. There's some other studies that have been done by the studies that were done by the pharmaceutical company regarding how cholesterol works and things like that.
Right.
But what happened during these studies, and now they've changed it, but back in the day, what they would do, pharmaceutical company do like 10 studies. And this would be on cholesterol because they were doing statin drugs and creating cholesterol reducing drugs.
Okay.
But when they got the 10 studies done, they didn't publish all 10 studies. They just published the 1 or 2 studies that were favorable to what they were trying to argue for. So now they changed the law. So now if they do 10 studies, they have to publish the results of all 10 studies. So there's a little bit of skewing that could be perceived here based on that. So that's a whole nother segment because the pharmaceutical industry is making big money off of statin drugs and all other cholesterol lowering drugs because of the way they did these studies. So just something that you need to be aware of and consider. I mean, you got to show all the studies, good and bad studies. You can't just show the ones that, this works for us.
So let's sell this. Right.
Exactly.
Right. I got it. All right. So we talked about a lot of the bad stuff. What about the benefits? What's the benefits of eating saturated fat?
Okay. So first of all, you got to take into context how much saturated fat you're actually taking in. So if you eat a piece of meat, it has saturated fat in it. And the reason for that is Mother Nature wanted it that way because proteins and fats are acidic in nature. So that's why they're combined. So when you eat them, they have fat built into them. There's a reason for that. They digest better. So that's one thing to help with this digestion. All right. And then you need cholesterol to help rebuild cells. And that comes from saturated fat. I mean, saturated fat is also good for your hormones because you need cholesterol. That's what you need to rebuild cells. And your body needs that to do the work. Okay. So fat supplies essential fatty acids. And your body is incapable of making all the essential fatty acids it needs. So that's where we have to eat some of nutrition. And the other thing I understand is you need, like red meat has high amounts of linoleic acid, which is what's also in olive oil. So it has a good amount of omega-3s. It also has alpha linoleic acid. So, you need to get these from food. That's what need to be derived to get these essential fatty acids. But people don't necessarily, they don't talk about that. And most of them don't even know about that. Also, fat is what ferries your key vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin D, E, and K. The reason that's because these are fat soluble vitamins. So you need fat to do that, to move those around your body. So all fats are not necessarily good, but saturated fat, if you understand how you're going to be eating it, you don't eat that much of it when you're having meals. Okay. Because there's only so much that's in the meat. You're not eating it by the spoonful. Okay. You're eating it from the foods that you're getting naturally. These are natural foods and your body also makes it. So keep that in mind. You need to look at the other things that could be causing the health issues like excessive carbohydrate intake, excessive processed food, excessive sugars. These are what's causing the problems. And whether people want to acknowledge that or not, just look around. So anyways, that's my soapbox on that one.
Well, for years we heard, because of the saturated fats and cholesterol, cut out red meat, watch how many eggs you eat, all this kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of this stuff is really good quality food for your system. And, so let's talk about how we should intake saturated fat. I mentioned ribeye steak, which I really like, thanks to you. Never had one, and then I had one, and it's like the best steak I ever had. But yeah. So, in your opinion, Armin, what's the best way that we should intake saturated fat?
It's real simple, Frank. You just eat real food. It's going to be in there. Don't worry about it. It's going to do what it needs to do for your body. So when you eat meat, you're getting saturated fat. If you have a little butter, you're going to get some saturated fat. If you cook with coconut oil, you're going to get some saturated fat. All right. But there's always so much fat that's in that. Okay. So your body's going to use it. It's going to break down.
Right.
But if you look at your consumption of those foods versus other foods, fat fills you up pretty quickly along with protein. Yeah. So you're only going to eat, you're only going to naturally eat so much. So my argument is just keep it really simple. I mean, butter, are you eating butter by the scoopful? Could you? You could, yeah, but are you really doing it? Probably not. And we're talking about grass-fed butter. We're not talking about the other the issues that, hormones and antibiotics, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then coconut oil, if you're cooking with coconut oil, I mean, a tub of coconut oil lasts me about 6 months to a year, depending on how much I'm cooking with my eggs. So, or what I'm cooking with. And when I cook red meat, I don't use fat. I don't put fat on the skillet to cook with. I just let the fat come from the meat to cook the meat, as another example. So keep it simple. Just eat real food. And your saturated fat problems will probably be non-existent. But hey.
Well, that sounds good to me. But I did bring up just a bit ago about the cholesterol dilemma. I'm sure a lot of people are concerned about their cholesterol because we've been told about cholesterol and how it's bad, or high cholesterol. But is there a way to determine if your diet is working regarding the cholesterol dilemma, Armin?
Well, that's another good point, Frank, is basically what the research has shown is your cholesterol is already preset by your body. Your liver adjusts it. So if you're eating foods, your body regulates it anyways. So when you eat cholesterol-based foods or fats, you only absorb 50% of what you're taking in. So the effect that it's going to have is not very much at all. Maybe in some cases 10% of what you're taking in will be absorbed. Right. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Your body has these built-in systems of what to do. So because your liver regulates your cholesterol, that's a different element there. So that's the thing you got to keep in mind. I'm sure that's going to go over like a lead balloon, but there's plenty of science that talks about that. Right. So it's really negligible on how much it's going to contribute to cholesterol in your system. But that's based on other arguments that have been made. Now, with that being said, if you're concerned about your cholesterol and really concerned about it, then I would say do this. Get a calcium score test or an apolipoprotein test. So what the calcium score test will do is determine if you have any calcium buildup in your arteries. The apolipoprotein test will tell you, okay, are my cholesterol particles large and fluffy, or are they small? And if the test comes back that they're large and fluffy, you're fine. Okay, but don't take my word for it. You can look it up yourself. But if they're small, then you may have an issue. And if you have an issue there, then you would address it, knowing that. But that's a different, again, that's a genetic thing. It's not so much food based. So this whole thing about being food based, there's a lot of arguments going to be flying on this one. But I can just tell you this: I'm 58. My cholesterol, I eat 6 eggs almost every day. And that's a lot of cholesterol. I eat steak, probably 4 or 5 times a week. And more often, it's just kind of expensive. So I don't necessarily eat it as much as I would like. Right. I do have hamburger. Okay. And again, my cholesterol is fine. My triglycerides are barely even show up. It's under 50. So, and triglycerides are a bigger factor than anything, which are also regulated by carbohydrate intake. So triglycerides are a lot more dangerous than elevated cholesterol. Anyways, so I don't have any problems, and I eat this all the time. So I think the other element to everything, though, is just have a good active lifestyle so you burn energy the right way on top of everything else. You can't just sit around not do anything and expect your health to be great. So that's a different conversation. But I just think that people need to be aware of that.
So, it seems like a pretty easy answer. You're eating naturally, right? You're trying your best to stay away or eat in moderation any sugary foods, processed foods. You really want to limit that or get rid of those. And when you talked about meat, you're talking, and even some of your vegetables too, the leafy vegetables, to eat organic and or grass-fed beef as well, correct?
Yeah, just if you eat real food, your body knows what to do with it. And you're going to have less issues. You're going to have fiber built in, and the fiber helps absorb fat and push it through your system, and helps absorb extra carbohydrates and sugars and push it through your system. So there's benefits of that, but you're not going to get that from processed food because it's been processed. There is no fiber. There's zero fiber. Okay, so eating real food clears out all these different factors that people, they try to tell you avoid all these foods. Okay, and that doesn't help because that affects your gut microbiome. And that's what's important for your immune system and your other body processes. So you just need to understand how to integrate your food based on how lean you want to be, or in what you're doing day to day, things like that.
Well, and the other thing that'll happen after all of this is you'll really enjoy your food that you're intaking more than you do now. I mean, just a couple changes I made: organic grass-fed butter. Wow, what a difference, right? I'm
all for it.
Yeah. And if you haven't had that ribeye steak ever, go get one. Unbelievable stuff,
ribeyes,
right?
To me they're better. They're probably better than a filet mignon to me. But I mean, filet mignons are good, but the ribeyes, I know they got a little bit of fat on them. But if you're scared of that, you can cut that off. But they're just so moist and taste so good. It's really not nice.
I'm with you. I think the ribeye is far better than a filet. So I'll just say that now. Yeah. So, well, Armin, thanks a lot for the great information. And you come up with all this great information, but we also rely on our audience for some of that too, right?
Well, yeah, and we'd like to get more input from you, other ideas, questions, of course, would be nice to, we can help address those. We're just trying to help people. We're giving you viewpoints. These are some of the viewpoints that Vince Gironda was very adamant about. I mean, he was big on steak and eggs and other things because he knew what it would do. He was so far ahead of his time. So that's what we're trying to do, is bring together other ideas to get you back to where you're naturally healthy and you're getting the best out of the world you want to get from it. Okay. By having good energy, good strength, looking good, feeling good.
Absolutely. And to leave those comments, you can do it on YouTube right under the show. You can just leave the comment there. Armin and I will see it and we will comment. And who knows, maybe your topic or comment will be a part of the next NSP Nutrition Show. If you'd rather email us, you can do that. It's support@nspnutrition.com, and we'll get that information. And hey, who knows, maybe your topic or question will be a part of the show. So, we do appreciate you watching or listening to the show. We hope it helps you. We hope that you're sharing the show with others. Maybe we can help somebody that is having a cholesterol issue, or thinks saturated fat is bad. Maybe we can help somebody. So please pass it on to your friends and family. But we appreciate you joining us today for the show, and check back next week for a brand new episode of the NSP Nutrition Show.
Hey, thanks for checking out the NSP Show. Go to nspnutrition.com, where you can find a whole heap of resources to help you achieve stunning definition and eye-popping levels of muscularity. Don't forget, you can save 10% on your first order by using the code NSP Show at the checkout. Catch you next time.